Hey guys, Reaganite71 here. Today we're going to talk about scroll sawing and in particular patterns and pilot holes. And if you're new to scrolling, you can actually just take basic patterns out of coloring books, things like that, put them on the wood and then try cutting them out. When it comes to scroll saws, you can get a scroll saw for under $200 at a home center. You can get them even cheaper on Craigslist. I'd say go with a cheap one at first, get comfortable with that, make a little sawdust, and if you really are into scrolling and you want to get into big projects, then you can look at something like the DeWalt. All the way up to, the DeWalt is going to run you around 500 bucks. If you get something like an Excalibur, which is like top of the line scroll saw, then you're over, 750, 800 bucks. So start out cheap and see if you like it. But let's talk about patterns now. Now when it comes to intricate fretwork like the train you see here, you do it free-handed, but you have a guide, and that guide is the pattern. As you can see right here, this is what it starts out as. You put it onto the wood, you make inside cuts, and then before long, here's what you wind up with. Now when it comes to patterns, you can find a lot of free ones online. Just do a Google search for free scroll saw patterns. In my case, I've got some that are over 10 years old that I bought from a commercial dealer in patterns, wildwooddesigns.com. They've got some really nice stuff and a wide variety of types of patterns. Today what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some 1/4 inch birch plywood, and I'm going to apply aircraft patterns since I'm into flying. I've had these for a long time. I never actually scroll with them, but I think they would be real fine for in teaching you how to do scroll sawing. So let's do that. Well, as you can see here, I've got 6 patterns plus a 7th, and I just don't have enough room with a 2 foot by 2 foot section of plywood. When you get into using hardwoods, which are really expensive, you're going to want to maximize the use of your wood, and the best way to do that is to simply cut the pattern down. When you're cutting out your pattern, make sure that you don't get too close to the actual wood that you're going to leave behind. You want to leave a little bit of overhang there for sure. That way the blade doesn't rip it up on you as you're cutting it out. Okay, now I've got all of these cut out. And by the way, if you're interested in these aviation patterns, they were made by a guy named Vernon Brown, and you could do a Google search and probably find these patterns somewhere on the web. But now that we've got them cut down, you can see I've got a lot of room, and I'll even have room left over for some other project in the future perhaps. So how do we adhere them? Well, we're going to use spray adhesive. A lot of times I'll use 3M's Super 77. This is just a general purpose number 45 spray adhesive. You can find this kind of stuff in the crafts department at Walmart or even in home centers and places like that. But it'll get it done. So now it's just the ever simple matter of taking the pattern, flipping it over, giving it a nice even coating of spray adhesive. But now we're just going to start on one end, and we're going to get it as flat as possible on here. There we go. Now that the patterns are on, I'm going to take them over to the scroll saw, and I'm going to cut around each one of these so that I have individual projects to work with. That'll make it easier to take them over to my Dremel drill press and put pilot holes in them. Now there's all kinds of blades that you can use in scroll sawing. Thick blades, thin blades, lots of teeth per inch, and few teeth per inch. And this is a 13 TPI or teeth per inch blade. It's a little bit thicker, and it gives you a nice fast cut, and so that's what I'm going to use. Another thing very important for doing a lot of scroll work quickly is the use of a foot pedal. That foot pedal right there costs you about just under $30 at Wildwood Designs. It allows you to use both hands on the workpiece and activate it with your foot. Very important. That's the other reason for getting it down into a workable piece. I got a 20-inch throat here from the blade to the back, so you've got to have it down a little bit so that you can work with it. There's one. 6 more to go. Now that I've got all of my work pieces down to manageable size, I'm going to do one more thing that's going to help keep the blade cool and also help keep the paper on the wood, and that is use clear packing tape on the front and back sides of the project. Keeps the blade cool, keeps the pattern on there. And this is also actually very good if you're going to stack cut items later on. When you decide to stack cut, of course, the most important thing is to keep the blade tight, because if you don't keep your scroll saw blade tight, what will happen is it'll bend on you and your top cut won't look the same as your bottom. In fact, you can actually cut through fragile holes, but that's something we'll get into later on. So now I'm just going to tape this bad boy up and we'll go put some pilot holes in. Pilot holes. Now if you got a big drill press like this one, you can use it to make some of your pilot holes, especially if you have areas with really big cutout areas. That's not a problem. Where you're going to get into a problem is when you have real fine small areas like this one right here. Then you're going to have to get into smaller drill bit sizes, all the way down to wire size drill bits. And you can find those bits at some home stores. Wildwood Designs carries them. They have a ton of scrolling supplies. And one of the things that I got from Wildwood was this little twist drill bit. And it'll take wire size bits, and you got to do it by hand though. And what I've found is that with the really small wire size bits, they'll break off really easy. So there's something else you can do. Now the Dremel drill press is going to allow you to use those wire size drill bits and make nice, clean, perfectly 90-degree holes into really tight spaces for your inside cuts. And the added benefit is you're going to be able to do a whole bunch at once without having to twist drill it and break them off, and this thing takes forever. This is so much better. Now the price that I was telling you about is brand new. You know, you can get a new Dremel for between 45 and 70 bucks. You can get the workstation, which you can get it for around 45. Or you can get on Craigslist or eBay, and you can find this stuff even cheaper. But I'd say it's a gotta have, especially if you're going to do a project like the dome clock, which has over 2,600 inside cuts. You're going to be boring a lot of pilot holes. So let's see how it works now. Here we go. It's also good to start your pilot hole near where you want your blade to take off. We'll start the hole here, and then we'll go right over and eat some of it out, put the blade right up against the line, and then just march off in that direction. When you have a really tight inside cut, and small one like this one, it's a good idea to shut the drill off, bring it on down, put it exactly where you want it, bring it back up, turn it on, and then go. There we go. Now we're just about ready to start cutting out our pattern here. But before I do that, I want to talk a little bit, just very briefly, about blades. All kinds of different scroll saw blades on the market. The one we used earlier was a 13 tooth per inch, and all of its blades were basically pointing straight down like this. There's another type of blade out there that's really good to have for intricate scroll work. It's called a reverse tooth blade, and it's got most of its blades pointing down just like the other one. But the bottom inch or so has some blades pointing upwards like this. And what that does is it gives you a nice smooth cut, and with intricate fretwork, you won't have the burring and the splinters and all of that. Let me show you a prime example right here. This is a piece of scrap that was left over. Here's the front side, and you can see it's fairly smooth, but when you flip it over and look, you see all that splintering right there? All of that? Now I've got a Galaxy #1 super small blade installed right now, and it's got reverse tooth. Let me show you the difference in using one with a reverse tooth blade. Now here's the difference between using a reverse tooth blade and a non-reverse tooth blade, just a standard regular scroll saw blade. See all that splintering there? I don't even have packing tape on here, and look at how smooth that is on the plywood. So using a reverse tooth blade is very good, especially if you don't want to run the risk of damaging your intricate fretwork when you go into sanding. Now it's just going to be a matter of making our inside cuts. And for that, we're just going to insert the blade into each one of these little pilot holes and make that cut. I'm going to make sure this blade is good and tight as I bring this down, and I'm going to pull up on the blade and lock it in with the thumb screw on the DeWalt here. This is a DeWalt 788 scroll saw, by the way, if you were wondering. Now for this first cut, what I'm going to do is come right up to this edge. I'm going to eat a little bit of it out along the line, and then I'm going to put the blade up against it and march off in a brand new direction. Just kind of working it back, the blade back and forth along that line in order to clear that area out. Once I've got the area cleared out, I'm just going to pop that blade right up against that line, and off we go. Following a line nice and straight like this takes some practice. You're going to notice that the blade has a tendency to want to wander off to one side, and so you have to kind of cant the work a little bit in order to make it track straight. And the thinner the blade, the more likely it is to wander off, so the more attention you have to pay it. Thicker blades, of course, will track a little bit straighter. When we get to a little curve like this, I'm just going to do a quick spin cut where I'm cutting and turning at the same time. If you don't have the skill for that yet, here's what you can do though. If you've got your foot pedal on, you can just pulse the power to the blade like this and do it a little slower. And then we're going to march right off in a brand new direction. You see how tight that is right there? What I'm going to do now is just back this up, and I'm going to come at it from the other side. I'm going to eat some of that line away right here in this tight corner like we did before. And then I'm going to march off in a new direction, and I'm going to join this here. Now I can just angle the piece toward this cutout area, and it should pop right out. There it is. It's a little bit uneven right in there, so now I'm just going to take the edge, the edge side of the blade and kind of smooth it out a little bit. Okay, I got the first inside cut done. Take the tension off, undo it. You can kind of get a rough idea of how it's looking by looking at the back side there. Starting out with a small project like this, there's only 12 inside cuts to something like this. That doesn't take very long at all. And you can see it didn't take long at all to do that first one. So start out small and work your way up. Build your patience. I used to take that dome clock to craft fairs and things like that, and people would always walk by, whistle, and go, "Whew, boy, that must take a lot of patience." I heard it over and over and over. And it does, but you just do this one little piece at a time, one inside cut at a time, and before you know it, you've got a nice little piece. And it's a nice way to get out in the shop, make some sawdust, and be creative. All right, we got all the inside cuts done now, and it's just a matter of taking off the outside now. I'm going to take my time, and if I do get off a line, I'm going to come back to it very slowly, because the outside here is going to make all the difference in the world. I got a curve here, so I'm just going to pulse cut it, nice and smooth. I could keep going, but for beginners, this is a nice way to make sure you don't go too far or anything like that, and then just pick right up. Want to come around and pick back up on this other line here. Watch this. Whoopsies. Now, when you have fragile pieces like this with the fretwork and all of that, you don't want to take a belt sander and be sanding and sanding and sanding, trying to get the paper off and stuff like that. So we're going to do something else. I'm going to take a cloth, and I'm going to take some mineral spirits, put just a little bit on it, and then we're going to wipe the top portion of the piece down and let it sit for a minute. This is going to get any of that excess glue from the spray adhesive off. It's also going to work through that paper, and then here in a few minutes we'll be able to peel it off. And when we do go to palm sand it, we can lightly palm sand it. We don't have to be real hard with it. Remember what I told you about the reverse teeth also? Look at the back side of this. Look at how smooth it is using reverse tooth blades. If we had used one of those other blades, oh, forget it. It would have been all ripped up and ugly. But it's nice and smooth and almost ready to go. So let's see how the mineral spirits are doing now on that stuck on. Look at that. It just Comes right off now. See this one right here? All I got to do is just kind of roll it with my thumb and off it goes. There we have it. Now the only thing left to do is just lightly palm sand it. Next time we get together, I'll show you some sanding when I work on some of these other airplanes. For now, this is Reaganite 71. Appreciate you joining me, and I hope you found it helpful. We'll see you next time.